Get to work, stick to work, black girl, don't talk, black girl, you talk too much. Get to work, stick to work, I heard.
Heard wind and whips crash into skin, lash out between screams. The agony that mama done birthed another one. Enslaved black boy learns to walk the field to see his life in 3/5. He understands why mama didn't keep him.
I also heard that pregnant slave women saved babies by taking their lives. A white woman said that the leading cause for genocide in the black community was violence at the hands of black girls. Like, violence don't be stalking black girls. Like, they ain't killing talking black girls, but black girls don't talk to no black girl. You talk too much freedom in your twang, too much liberation in your slang. Black girl, why you put breath to words and speak poetry? And speaking, why are you speaking to me, black girl? Why are you yelling at me, black girl? Shut up.
Black girl, don't apologize for being broken. Rip out your soul, speak up and talk anyway. Share your human, wholehearted misery and mention every reason mama told you to leave. Run away into freedom, dreams that don't stop chasing you. Clinging on body, back breaks into buckling, distorted screams.
They say, why you so mad, black girl? Like black girl don't got reason to be angry.
Rupture. Rip into rage, ravage and rampage, show them all the bruises, the way anti-Blackness beat you into compliance, the pain of feeling the fear they feel and police you with. Lock in, press down black brilliance, apply pressure, black children apply pressure when reading. Resistance is existing, whispers gallivanting to share your success, black girls speak up.
Mama always said women sit like this with a switch in her hips and that twang ain't a thing. And if I ever want a ring, I better sit like this. But mama, don't nobody want a black girl. So forget that switch. Switches strengthened my lisp, ingrained in my flesh was that twang. Cause nobody want black girl to sing. So black girl write song on body. Black girl wear song on body. Black girl ain't seen unless somebody want black girl to work to get to work for black girl.
Truth is, Black Queen is universe, the earth like sunflower, like sacrifice. Let life teach you the truth, how Underground Railroad was yellow bricks stitched with black ancestor sweat and death. Black bodies that bled to death so Gen X and then millennials can educate Gen Z about how Phyllis Wheatley sang to souls about black souls through poetry. West African proverb, the words earthquake underneath the shadow of the white gaze break. Racism with this epiphany, black girl. This obvious truth. Your mind is sanctuary. Grow into purpose.
You ain't working for the white man. You working for black girls, the ones who ain't got that switch or that twang and who only want to sing whenever the hell they want to, generate words like poetry. Speak breath to words like poetry. Your body is not a choice for them to make. Be autonomous in the path that you take. They say poetry means words on a page. That it sounds like roses, that it sounds like beauty or something real pretty. My poetry sounds like shackles.
Like sunset after 6, black codes were curfews. A punishment for being free by a constitutional amendment that reads, if you are arrested, black girl, you are re-enslaved, subject to the noose, whiteness choking black out of you.
Like shorelines, like slave ships, like stories of daughters, motherless daughters of generation with nothing left to inherit but black girl.
You are rain, storm, eloquent, rage, purge and believe that your action is testimony and protest in the world that living double conscious is costing you peace. But like fresh garden and honeybee, you evolve, become like tree firmly planted to forgive and liberate the world that hates you.
They don't want you to talk. They say you talk too much, like silence win us trophy. Like we get big medal, like medal help us see tomorrow, like sing tomorrow ain't no victory. Speak my poetry, now that's victory. My words be my body be survival, don't cut. My body don't cut, nobody black girl. When they ask you to shut your mouth and get to work.
You riot with your words, embrace your humanity, let them see them through you, disrupt their prejudice and that lingering thought they've had about black girls like black girls talk too much. No. Black girls don't want to be silenced.
You tell them my work are these words, and when there's nothing left to inherit, my words are survival. I used to carry around Audre Lorde's book, Sister Outsider, like it was the feminist Bible. Her essay, The Uses of Anger, Women Responding to Racism, taught me that rage is a legitimate political emotion. She writes, focused with precision, it can become a powerful source of energy serving progress and change. My anger and rage haven't always been focused with precision. The process of both becoming a feminist and becoming okay with rage as a political feminist superpower has been messy.
Welcome back to Education in Context, where we interrogate the historical and ideological roots of anti-Black thinking so we can reimagine a world where Black and brown people do more than just survive, because we know
what we don't name, we normalize.
In our last episode, we explored how systems of exclusion create collective loss and prevent communities from reaching their full potential. We examined how racism doesn't only harm those directly targeted by it, but it weakens our collective capacity to flourish. Today, we turn our attention to something deeply personal, deeply political, and often deeply misunderstood: Black women's rage. Popular culture has given us countless narratives about the angry Black woman. We've been taught to focus on emotion instead of the conditions that produced it. But Dr. Brittney Cooper invites us to ask a different question. What if women's anger is evidence? Evidence of disappointment, evidence of communities that often depend on Black women's labor, leadership, and sacrifice and resilience, while overlooking Black women's needs, boundaries, and humanity. And because this conversation requires all of us in the room, we will also explore what accountability, listening, and solidarity require from Black men for true building within our communities to occur.
And before we jump into our conversation, I want to welcome a dear friend, the Conscious Lee, also known as George Lee Jr. Today's guest is someone who has spent his entire life at the intersection of education, advocacy, and truth-telling. George Lee Jr. is a Hall of Fame college policy debater, a two-time NAACP Image Award nominee, and a Webby Award nominee, whose work in the education space has built a community of over 850,000 people. He holds a master's degree in adult education and human resources, and he brings that same rigor and heart to every conversation he enters. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, so to get us started, we just want to focus on how Cooper argues that Black women's anger is often judged before it is understood. Society frequently focuses on Black women's emotional responses rather than the conditions that produce them. Rage is often treated as a personal failing instead of a political response.
And we have our first quote on page 5, which reads, "Black women turn to sass when rage is too risky because we have jobs to keep, families to feed, and bills to pay." And so when we think about, this first quote, and as we grapple with it, like, what is Black women's anger, or why is it treated differently from everyone else's? I think that's an interesting question to ponder, because I would argue that, intersectionality and the ways in which women assume identities that, have historically been oppressed contributes to, the rage that women feel and why they rightfully feel that way. So
yeah, and I'm excited to have a guest here, the Conscious Lee, aka George Lee, because I think it's important that we're having this conversation not only from Black women who have for years historically communicated and articulated this rage in a particular way, but also from other Black folks in our communities, specifically Black men, and the ways in which they might perceive why specifically we think we, whether you are complicit in it or what you observe, are treating Black women's rage differently than we see Black men's rage treated or other non-Black people's rage treated in this country. So just to get us started, George Lee, I don't know, why is Black women's anger treated differently from everyone else in your opinion?
In my opinion, Black women are seen as being emotionally unstable. And I think a lot of the perceptions that Black women express are seen through that lens of instability. And I think as a result, a lot of people feel justified or able to rationalize with whatever emotional response a Black woman is doing as being either inherently unstable or inherently unnecessary, i.e. angry Black woman, i.e. you giving me sass, i.e. all these various things that tend to pathologize how Black women emotions are expressed. I think that simplifying it, Black women emotionally unstable is how the world indoctrinates us to be Black women.
And so I guess my question to you guys are like, what messages do you think you receive that kind of perpetuate this like phenomenon that I feel like George is elevating here? Like where do we start to learn that Black women are unstable or Black women are emotionally like arrested? Like when are we learning that?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is, first rooted in this idea that we're already positioned as aggressive, as violent. And so it makes sense that, of course, I can look at this Black woman and easily associate them with, that same sentiment, even though we know that's rooted in, racism and racist ways of being. One of the things that I also think about is, how these stereotypes that women have to navigate, like they also are expected to absorb that injustice without feeling any frustration. So like, not only are you traumatized and re-traumatized by way of, the identities you assume in the way in which our society oppresses you, but then you don't get to say anything about it. You don't get to release what arguably is justifiable anger.
It's so crazy because I think about like I went to schools where like this where predominantly kids did not look like me once I got to like third grade. And it was so interesting because once I went into this new school district, they put me in attitude management and I was like, what is this? And I was in third grade, right? Like, and I think,
attitude.
No, but it's crazy because Dr. Brittney Cooper calls this her chapter like the problem with sass. And it makes me think specifically to my unique experience of how like I'm constantly experiencing microaggressions, isolation, like all of these things in this very white school district. And your response to that is to put me in like attitude management. Like, I don't even know what that means, right? And I think it's like, even at that time, my parents were new to the American education system as two immigrant people, and had no semblance of awareness around like racial politics in this country to even be like, what is this program you have my daughter in? And I think my mom's only response was, don't be telling that lady my business. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, that is so interesting to me is I'm having experience, my parents are having experiences is navigating this country as Black people, as Black immigrants, and the ways in which like we are positioned as problem that needs to be solved as opposed to people that need to be supported, even in like at 9 years old when I'm in third grade. And I think something that we see here is like Black women rightfully experiencing emotions as it relates to the things that we are navigating are constantly positioned as like danger. Yeah. And how do we like protect ourselves from that is like through policing Black women or making them feel like you are the issue, not the things you are experiencing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that kind of brings us to our next question here of just like, when did we realize that Black women's anger was connected to something deeper than emotion? And I don't know when I realized that though. Like, I think I have always felt like it was a knowing about something. And I'm like, oh, something is wrong with y'all. Why you don't understand why I'm mad? I've always felt like that, but I recognize everybody has not always felt like that. Yeah. And I guess I'm really curious you all's experience of when you realized you were kind of like either complicit in some of these things or had more information to receive Black women in a different way.
Yeah. I think for me, I guess I'm reflecting about my mom. I guess I remember growing up and seeing how my grandfather treated my grandmother. Like, it was a very much so traditional relationship. The husband is, the man of the household. My grandmother was like the head of the house and she was the homemaker. And so I think that ideology my mom grew up with. And I think there's also like this piece of her religious identity, because in religion, women are expected to be submissive. And so you have this religious ideology that you grow up with juxtaposed to you seeing your mother, my mother's mother, experience this being subject to a man, I think is how my mom developed this interesting relationship to men, and how that did play out in rage in some instances, because she was resisting the thing that she experienced and the thing that she was taught to believe within her own religious identity. So
when do you feel like you were just like, oh, my mom is rightfully upset right now?
I don't think I was ever aware. I think because again, when you grow up in a religious household, strict religious household, I don't know that we are dissecting people's rights. I think that we are dissecting what does the Bible say, and I think that kind of encompasses everything. And so there was ever a nuanced conversation about the way women were treated, the way people of color are treated. So I think I was very oblivious to it, but I think looking back on, I understand why my mom may have made some of the decisions she made in her life, because that was her model growing up. That was her truth. George, what about you? I'm curious to get your take on this question.
My mama had me when she was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because both of my parents was teenagers when they had me, I feel like we grew up a lot together. And I think that media played a big role in how I got to learn about everything in terms of Black culture, Black women, outside of what I was seeing in my own little trailer park or in my own little part of Bryan, Texas I was in. I had to, when y'all asked the question, I had to Google it. Tyler Perry and Mary J. Blige had a big impact on how I understand emotions and pathology around Black women, especially when it comes to love, survival, support, struggle, all that. And I think it wasn't until Tyler Perry's Diary of a Mad Black Woman, the play, you feel me? From the play, what I'm saying? Before the white folks got a hold to him, before the world got a hold to him, and he was doing plays for particular types of Black people, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's important too. He was doing it for church Black folks, hood Black folks, and the people that's in the, the middle of the Venn diagram. I'm doing all this soliloquy by saying I was already introduced to tropes about Black women's emotions through hip hop, through angry Black women, through, sassy Black women, through all the various ways that Black women are trivialized for having emotions. Rap music do some of it as well. A lot of the Black movies that we watched did some of it as well. It wasn't until Tyler Perry's film that put it in title, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, where I watched that play and thought, these are all the things that I've seen my mother experience to go through, and or what I heard Mary J. Blige talk about. This sounds synonymous with y'all say a Black woman. To me, I feel like even though I was only 11, I think I was already thinking very critically about what was being said to me and what message specifically about the madness in Black women was. To me, it was like, hey, Black women are inherently mad. It was another question y'all was saying. I was thinking, like, technically, I would argue the entire Black community is seen as being overly emotional. You know how the kids be like, Miss overly. Yeah, the whole world views Black people. I say the nation, I'm trying to stick with the national analysis. The nation views Black people as being overly emotional. And I think by relationship or by relationality is like Black women birth the Black community. So if you're both birthed in a community that's overly emotional, you must be. What does it say about you?
That's
and your
real.
epigenetics, your suffering, and your nurturing, and your, nurturing, naturing, whatever it's like. And to me, I think that's how I understand how pathological Black women being seen inherently emotional is.
Yeah.
I also like something that you're making me think about is like, because I completely didn't even think about the ways in which like media played a role,
Yes.
etc. But also
does.
like something that George said that is really resonating with me is he said he feels like at 11 he was thinking very critically. And I do think like we've had this conversation that when you are not aware, you are not even, to your point, you're not even dissecting those interpersonal interactions you're not even making the connections between media and what you're experiencing. And so you do have to have a certain level of consciousness to even be like, wow, like my mom is rightfully angry in this moment because she is experiencing this injustice. You have to even be aware that like that is an injustice. You have to even be aware to like make the connection. And I think to our point that we've made in multiple episodes, like this is why like reading is fundamental. This is why having these conversations is fundamental, because it helps us to actually reflect on like, is this at play in my life? Has this been at play in my life? What are the ways in which I'm responsible to intervene? Which I think brings us to like surfacing the system and how Cooper argues that Black women's anger does not emerge in isolation. It emerges from the intersection of racism, sexism, misogynoir, and the expectation that Black women will continue carrying communities while suppressing their own needs.
And the guiding question here, before I let you say the quote, Larry, is what systems create the conditions that produce Black women's rage?
Yeah. And as I think about what you mentioned, George, I do think that is an example, like, the media that we consume, the things we listen to, the movies that we watch, the music that we read is a part of that conditioning. The quote that's grounding this question is from page 3, where it reads, "The truth is that angry Black women are looked upon as entities to be contained, as inconvenient citizens who keep on talking about their rights while refusing to do their duty and smile at everyone." And so, I don't know, this quote immediately makes me think about subjectification. George, what's your thought?
There is a false binary that our world like to do when it comes to being logical and being emotional. And we say that in order for you to be emotional, you can't be logical. And I think that's already getting into the pathology. When you start seeing certain bodies as being inherently more emotional than others, you already start to negotiate how logical they can really be. And I think this is a part of the binary or a part of the spectrum of how Black women get their emotions trivialized. And then even going as further as thinking about technically, the world ain't got no problem with anger. Technically, America loves anger.
We see it.
It's only when you put the descriptor or the person that's experiencing the anger as Black woman. Think about it right now. A white man feeling angry can be mobilized into a political movement that can put them in presidency. You see what I'm saying? There are other they can have their anger mobilized in becoming a infrastructure, a business, a presidency. You know what I'm saying? It's seen as being legitimate. You feel me? But when Black women are experiencing anger, to me, I think about like the medical field. It's like, yeah, you have the capacity to take on pain and violence. Shut up, Black woman, and take the pain and violence. I would never be mad if a dog barked. I would never be mad the sky's blue. Black woman experience pain. What are you crying about? And to me, this is like the pathology of emotional intelligence. Because how you be trivialized to being emotional intelligent? Like,
this is.
I was gonna just say, like, I think we mentioned that in the episode, the ways in which we, like, in the medical industry, they think that Black women can sustain more pain.
Yes.
But I also like George's point about the ways in which who can experience rage and where we see that show up in system structures. Because if we look at school shootings, that is a material, like, that is white rage materialized, right? And the ways in which we are still able to center the humanity of the school shooter and say, oh, he was mentally ill, oh, he had a mental break, but we do not afford that same access to humanity to Black women to be like, maybe she's having a mental break, given the ways in which she's experiencing.
Think about it. Right now, Trump was able to approve a $1.7 billion slush fund because white men felt uniquely angry for the 2020 election results. Their anger was legitimized by political
which was an
system,
insurrection, which is wild.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we even seeing everybody, hey, you being angry is justified so much that the government feels they can give you reparations for it. But you can think about it. Hey, a group of Black women show up to storm the nation's capital. How many Black women get murdered by the police? How many?
That's real.
All
That's
of them,
real.
half of them. A quarter of them. I don't see Black women's anger in any political movement in American history that gets to be legitimized like straight cisgender white men during the insurrection. They get to be seen as freedom fighters. They're angry though. I want to be clear. What fueled them was straight anger, resentment, madness.
Yeah, I one of the things that I'm thinking about as I hear both of you all talk is, and Dr. Cooper kind of talks about this in her book. She shares the experience of her mother and how the men in her mother's life, when we think about the conditions in a woman's lived experience, like if men are socially conditioned to, be violent towards women, be violent towards Black women, then that also becomes a part of their experience. And so, what are the ways in which our society, the systems that exist through all the things that we've talked about, reinforce, I can be aggressive, I can be violent towards this woman. To your point, George, violence means guns. One of the experiences that she brought up was, and she gave us a statistic, like 8 I think women per week, usually by guns, are murdered. And so the way in which violence lives, within the experience of Black women that have to navigate these spaces, it's unfortunate. It's sad. It really is. It's sad.
It makes me think about the piece that we recorded for this, and
It does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
when I said
Yeah.
the ways in which history constantly repositions Black women as the culprits of violence, as if violence don't be stalking Black girls. And I think that that's a real thing of how, and we can start to talk about this, but how even within our own communities, people are not able to acknowledge, to George's point, the data points that suggest we are rightfully upset.
Yes.
Right. And so sometimes for me, even in when I'm thinking about dating or talking to Black men in my community, when they say things like, I don't really like Black girls because, Black girls always just so mad. And I'm like, that's so crazy for you to utter, right? And to know the condition of Black people in this country and to utter it. Right. And so I think it also shows a dehumanization of Black women that we can experience the same things as you, but not actually experience the same emotion for some reason, because we're not humans, right?
Yeah.
And I think this idea of not only the angry Black woman, but the super Black woman, and how you must be quiet about what you are experiencing, even within your own communities. And I love this interview with Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, because she basically holds him accountable to that. And she was like, I want to experience the joyful version of my partner when he comes home. And James Baldwin's like, how can I? I go to work, I'm experiencing this and this and this and this and this as a Black man in America. And she's like, I'm experiencing it too.
Yeah.
And I'm still showing up. I'm still showing up for you vulnerably. I'm still showing up for you with care, right?
Yeah.
And it's I guess leading to my question to you guys of how do you think Black men have benefited from the labor Black women were expected to provide?
For politically, socially, economically, Black men have benefited almost the most in the Black community uniquely from Black women's labor. I feel like when it comes to being able to value Black women's labor, so much of the world has bought into the super Black woman trope, the angry Black woman trope. So it's not just white supremacy in the outside world, in the outside community that's having all these crazy expectations on Black women. We know it's our own community as well. We know that, I think it was Jasmine Pickens, and when we was in debate, she was one of my debaters. She had the Tariff-A, the world doesn't really love Black women. The world is love what Black women can do for them. And even when I was in my 20s and I heard that, it really made me sit with and think about, if you ask a person to tell me what you love about Black women, they probably gonna describe a slave or a very, very obedient, servant. You know what I mean? So you really have to sit with, when you talk about what you love about Black women, and talk about what we think about Black women within our own community, a lot of us have to really sit with as Black men how we also contribute to, the chips on shoulders, the carrying of boulders, the pain, the strife, the hurt, you know what I'm saying? We contribute to it. And I think that in many ways, we've internalized this idea that Black women can deal with not only struggle of, but shut up, woman, you can deal with pain. Now, white folks in the health department said you can deal with pain. And baby, you can deal with my pain too. If you really love me, you can deal with my pain. And to me, the Nikki Giovanni thing was listen, man, you lie to that white man at work and you real cunning and you smile with him, lie to me too. If you can lie to them and that lie that lie concludes with you being able to create this reality for the white man to be comfortable in, do it for me.
Yeah.
And to me, the resistance, the subtle pause, that James Baldwin, one of the greatest, they got hit on my wall right there. You're on the wall. So, I love it.
Yeah, look.
Those skills and him having to be it spoke volumes.
Yeah. This is, one thing you brought up was this idea that, women are conditioned to endure some really toxic situations. The world does not care enough when they see it to say anything about it. And the world also doesn't care enough to, when they do see it, really be like, no, this isn't cool. And I also think that this kind of gets to when we think about examining the outcomes. Cooper argues that when Black women are expected to be endlessly strong, capable, and self-sacrificing, communities begin to normalize unequal labor. The expectation becomes so common that the burden itself becomes invisible. And so when we think about our guiding question, what are the consequences of expecting Black women to carry communities without equivalent care and support? It's grounded in our quote from page 7, which reads, "Watching Serena Williams play, particularly when she's beating white women, is like watching eloquent rage personified. Her shots are clear and expressive. Her wins are exultant. Her victories belong to all of us, even though she's the one who does all the work. That's kind of how it feels to be a Black woman. Like, our victories belong to everyone, even though we do all the work." And so I'm really interested for us to kind of talk about the ways in which, you know, the burden, you know, especially in terms of labor, is always placed on the Black woman and how they are just expected to be exceptionally well.
Yeah, I also, just before we get into that, want to define quickly eloquent rage as it comes up in the book, as that's obviously the title of our book. But the transformation of anger into analysis, truth-telling, resistance, and action. And I think, like, I really love this quote from Dr. Brittney Cooper, because especially in an instance where the UFC fighter got up and called Michelle Obama a man, like, for the world, I think this is an instance of how Black women can be so excellent and people can attach themselves so much to this fictitious, like, idea of who they want this Black woman to be to them and still discard them, right? And I think Serena Williams is another example of that. We love Serena Williams as the Olympian. We love her as a representation of icon, but we discard her in the same ways we talk about her body and her access to femininity in the same ways. So even there, like, when we're thinking about what we think women can endure in violence, specifically Black women, because white women's tears are highly listened to. And Dr. Brittney Cooper talks about that in her book, how even for herself, she was, like, apologetic of Bill Cosby until white women were like, X, right? And so I think it's like this idea that, to George's point, we love what Black women can produce and we don't actually love
them. We don't love
care
them.
for them and support them in the ways in which they deserve, you know?
And it really gets at this idea of, like, disposability. Like, I value you enough for what you can, you know, produce. And when that's done, I can discard you. I can also find another one. And so, you know, this idea that there's no value in your life beyond, you know, you being able to work. And that is rooted in, you know, the ideologies that we have about, you know, working in our country. There's a slave mindset about it. You know, we will work 16 to 20 hours a week and think that that's perfectly healthy. And so what does that say when then a Black woman is subject to that kind of way of thinking, or the world thinking about her?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself. I don't want to say that I'm speaking for all Black women, but I think for me the impact is, especially being a leader in education, like, it is so exhausting to feel like you want my labor so bad, but you don't want me. And that is so exhausting, especially as a leader, because I specifically choose to work in schools with kids that look like me. And it is very hard to show up every day and present for my students, like, as if I'm not navigating the same things that I'm trying to support them and not having to navigate amongst my colleagues, right? Amongst people outside of the work, like in my entrepreneurial endeavors. And I think it does something to your psyche, right? A large part of, like, me being in therapy and me getting support is around navigating the rest of the world's inability to humanize me. And I don't think that, like, people are as aware of that, because I'm not coming to work crying. You know, like, I actually had a principal say to me one time, like, you know, Chanel, it's just so hard for me to, like, she's like, I'm actually really good at empathizing with people, but with you, it's just so hard because you just seem like you just have it all together. And I was like, and this is a political position, right? Like, I have to present as if I have it together. I'm a school leader. I'm a principal. Imagine if I came in here crying, right? Like, you know, so I just think it's like, in those moments when people are able to explicitly say, I cannot empathize with you because you're not performing vulnerability in a way in which I can receive, or it's disheartening
Yeah.
because it makes me feel not human. It makes me feel like I have to lay all my trauma on the table for you to humanize me. And that's like an isolating experience for sure.
Yeah.
That's an
Yeah.
isolating experience
I
for
think
sure.
that's what's real fast. I think that's what's dope about Dr. Cooper's analysis, or Dr. Cooper's concept of eloquent rage, and the analysis specifically on Serena Williams. If you being real, she talking about Serena Williams existing, doing her job, and trying to dominate the field. To me, what's important is how emotions and rage and anger gets mapped onto her body,
Yes.
especially when she's beating particular types of white women on the tennis field, on the tennis court. We understand that now they start to try to weaponize the rules against her. We know that they try to play victim. We know they try to make her out to be an angry Black woman. Now all she's doing is hitting it with precision. She's really just existing in competition. And because of that, it causes a bunch of outrage from different people for different reasons. And I think that's what's, to me, very genius about her Serena Williams. And then it's saying, like, to me, the word eloquent and rage, if you know the definition of 2 words, you know, like, these 2 words don't really go together that great.
Yeah.
But that is the tension I feel like a lot of Black women are forced to do. It's like, hey, these 2 things don't go together great, but there they are existing.
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Cooper says about eloquent rage is that it is clear and it is precise. So like my rage, what I feel, why I feel it, is I'm very clear about why I feel it. And it's precise. I need to direct this rage at something that is going to produce the outcome that I desire. And so if that means that I'm going to walk up to my boss and be like, hey, actually didn't appreciate that comment, didn't make me feel good. I feel, you know, that this is rooted in X, Y, and Z. Let's talk about it because I don't want to have this experience again. Or it can mean, you know, something else. But I think Dr. Cooper does a really good job, like helping us understand how the rage in which we feel, which is an energetic emotion, you know, it's unpleasant, but it's energetic. It has a lot of energy behind it, how that energy can be directed towards, you know, progress or you evolving as a human being to change or to affect change in your life.
And I think something that you're making me think about is the article that Dr. Brittney Cooper mentions in the quote we open with, uses of anger, or Black women responding to racism, or women responding to racism by Audre Lorde. She says in there, anger is filled with information, right? And I think that she starts to distinguish the difference between 2 different ideas of it, like the emotion by itself and the object being destruction, and then rage being the object being change, right? Like, and this idea that people like to try and couch Black women into just being directionless in their anger.
Yes.
When actually it very much is justified and often, to the point you just made, precise in how they navigate it. But because, to George's point he made earlier, we have to make you seem irrational because then that denounces the violence. We have to continuously repaint it as this being directionless rage, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a piece too, is like, imagine existing and it being coded as you trying to harm someone. Like, I'm trying to win. This is a game. Like, what are we doing? Like, and I think that that's a piece for sure. I think that brings us to exposing inequity. And Cooper argues that Black women often occupy a unique position in society, expected to stand with Black communities against racism, while simultaneously navigating sexism within those same communities too. Often, Black women are asked to delay, minimize, or silence their own needs in service of collective goals. So our guiding question here is, what inequities are revealed when Black women's needs are consistently subordinated to everyone else's?
And that brings us to our next quote to ground this thought from page 67 and 68, where it reads, "Black feminism taught me that in the battle with white women over racism and with Black men over sexism, I can never go wrong in picking myself. I love, embrace, and keep company with Black men who have yet to fully reckon with their sexism. Similarly, I can, in limited instances, admire and offer support to white women who have not yet fully reckoned with their racism." I really think this is a thoughtful point to make. Like, if I can sit here and begin to understand the ways in which patriarchy impacts or informs the way the men in my life operate and how I have to navigate that, then I can, in a similar way, as she says, and in limited instances, which I appreciate, like limited meaning, this is, I can't do this that long, but in limited instances, I can, be in community with another white woman to begin to understand how they have internalized, racism or their own ways of excluding or seeing Black women as the other or as a problem or as something to be feared or as, whatever the adjective is to describe them.
Yeah, and I think like when it says here what inequities are revealed, like I also am just like, dang, like why do Black women always have to be the ones to like center other people's humanity in these instances, to like have to be like, okay, I know you're going through this, Black man, so I'm gonna just let that roll off my shoulder. Or like, I know that you're struggling, white woman, so I'm gonna handle this in a particular way. Like, at what point do like white women say, I am aware? I actually had an experience with this in college where this white woman got up and I was so frustrated. She could see I was frustrated and I didn't even articulate it. She just cut me off and was like, to all the white women in the room, I'm about to send you guys an article about why white women's tears are dangerous. And I was like, okay. Like, let's do it, right? Like, I think we just need more of that energy of like people holding each other accountable so that Black women can experience a moment of reprieve. Like, I think that is something that when I'm thinking about inequity is the division of labor and care, we're always required to be the ones centering that, So that's something that's making me think about.
George, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this idea of Black women and the way they have to navigate like both sexism from the men in their life and racism from white women.
I think of just exploitation and exhaustion, how exhausting it has to be to constantly have your identity or parts of your identity exploited by different groups that is very subservient. They usually come at the expense of you. And so I think Dr. Cooper's analysis of being like, man, picking me is the best thing I can do, which y'all show me. I think the history tells us that there is a lot of expectations, or what I've learned, they call it like a lot of fungibility that is expected from Black women when it comes to, hey, I can pick you up and put you down like a toy. If I want to deal, I'm gonna deal with you. If I don't want to deal with you, I ain't gonna deal with you. If I want to break you, I'm gonna break you. If I want to binge you, I'm gonna binge you. Literally, I got 2 kids, and when I think about fungibility, I think about how children play with toys. They care about them until they don't. They will break them just because they feel like it. They will throw them just because they had the urge to. They will put it up and to me, that's fungibility. And I think that this quote, this issue we're talking about right now, it illustrates what fungibility is, and it shows that there is a constant exhaustion or a state of exhaustion that Black women are put in, whether they're talking about their fellow Blacks or their fellow women's.
Yeah.
For sure. And I guess like what responsibility do you guys think Black men have when Black women name harm within our communities?
I say still with how you implicated with it. Like a lot of us have a hard time dealing with how we the bad guys. A lot of us have a hard time dealing with how we get in the way of the progression that we advocate for. Sorry for the dog barking. But what I would say is that very simply, I think that us as men have to become anti-sexist. Like we have to acknowledge that sexism is bad in every instance, and we can read all the literature around feminism and around patriarchy and sexism. But we can never become ignorant to how us as men, us as being, masculine beings, us as being positioned as being patriarchs, how we always are privileged by all the things that we said we were against, and how we are ignorant in many instances to how we can get in the way of women's progression. So for me, as an ally, as an accomplice of women's progression, I have to always be thinking about, how do I get in the way?
Yeah. I really resonate with that point, George, because I'm thinking about, then this is kind of part of our mission with education in context of listening. So real learning listens first. And so if I want to understand the experience of the Black women in my life, I have to listen to their stories. And I think every story is nuanced, because Black women might experience the world in a number of different, ways. And so, like, how does their experience, their collective experience, especially as an adult, how do you use that information to then understand how to support them? And I think that's something that I think, when I think about my mom's life, she could have benefited from having a partner that, she's been married a couple of times. So having a partner that could be that for her to be able, and I think Black women need that, whether that's coming from, and I love how Dr. Brittney Cooper kind of talks about in her book, the relationships that she desires with other Black women, because that is where she talked about intervention, something about an intervention.
Homegrown intervention.
Yeah, homegrown intervention. That's the intervention. That is Black women in community being able to reflect those experiences and share their experience and make meaning out of their experiences so that they can figure out, okay, what is the way forward, and I think that is what encompasses like Black feminism.
Yeah.
Like, how are we collectively aligning around what we know are oppressive systems against our identity so that we can affect change?
Yeah, and I think something that you both are making me think about is like, this is an indictment of ideology and it is an indictment of actions, because and Dr. Brittney Cooper talks about this in her book, like, there are plenty of times in which I've tried to build community with other Black women, and I've recognized some of the experiences that Dr. Brittney Cooper named of their own internalization of misogynoir and like their inability to form relationships with me because they've said that, like, you're just so secure in yourself. You're just so, and I'm like, so that should inspire you to be secure in yourself. Like, that shouldn't make you feel like you gotta hate on me or like anything like that, because I want us to both win. Like, I don't see you winning as me losing, even though I know a lot of us do see that, right? And so I think accountability within our communities is not just between Black men and Black women. It is also between Black women and Black women. It is also between Black men and Black men, right? Yeah. You see your homeboy doing something crazy, like, yo, nah, like, that's not a thing we're doing, right? And I think it is hard, to George's point, to position yourself as the person that is complicit or perpetuating the violence. But we know that anything we don't name, we normalize. And so it's important that we are intervening. Yeah. Which I think brings us to, what does it look like to envision liberation? And so Cooper challenges us to move beyond critique and toward creation. Rage can reveal injustice, but liberation requires us to build something different. Black women's anger is not simply telling us what is broken, it is often illuminating what is needed. The guiding question here is, what kind of world becomes possible when we listen to what Black women's rage is trying to build? Yeah, and as we think about this question, is grounded in our quote from page 273 and 274, where it reads, "Rage can help build us things too. The clarity that comes from rage should also tell us what kind of world we want to see, not just what kind of things we want to get rid of. I'm not interested in a feminist project that only works to tear down things. Black women know that justice is rarely found in the rubble. If your rage can do anything for you, I hope it can do for you what it has done for me. Help us too." And I think that's an interesting way to view rage. Like, rage is help. Rage is this thing that you can use to aid you in reimagining what your life can be when you lean into that rage and direct it towards something that is going to create some positive effect in your life, whatever that might be. I mean, I also think like it is important that we are specific about it being Black women's rage because of the ways in which, like how George elevated earlier, how other people get access to rage and it is viewed as information, whereas Black women's rage is viewed as nonsensical, right? And so I think what is possible when we listen to Black women's rage and what they are trying to build is that we can develop a praxis that starts to intervene in some of the ways in which Black women experience violence, right? Because rage is not a new concept, and rage is not only specific to Black women, but when rage is coupled with Black women is when it is then problematized. So how do we then like listen to that rage to inform what our organizing looks like, et cetera. And so, George, I'm curious, like, what do you think would change if we treated Black women's experience as expertise as opposed to problem?
I think a lot of violence that we normalize in our society would be mitigated. Black women's expertise being legitimized and being accessible. I didn't say accessible, being legitimized. I think that it can give us a new reality. I had the opportunity of being a speaker at the a Black Maternal Health Summit in St. Louis, and I learned a lot about midwiferys and a lot about doulas. And when you learn about the history of childbirth in this country, you see that when Black women were doing a lot of that labor, it wasn't as much death. And there was I think it was like a stat I seen, like 80% of childbirths to a certain point was brought in by Black women. And then seeing that when we started to medicalize that field, how because Black women's expertise was seen as something that's not rational, that a lot of Black death became justified because they did not want to think about the expertise, the knowledge, the information that Black women had already liberated, already was using for 100, 200 years. To me, it showed like, hey, because this field wanted to ignore Black women expertise, it literally concluded in dehumanization of not only Black women, but Black people. So we see in this one instance, I think it can be applied in other fields and other industries and other histories that show that, hey, if you allow for Black women expertise to spill over into this industry as being legitimate, it would definitely help the overall performance of this industry, not only with how it engages with Black people, but with the entire world. You say, well, this is the entire country. I'm gonna keep it in America. You know what I mean? But
the one thing that I just want to elevate here, and it's a small thing, but it's not a small thing. It's a really big thing. You mentioned in, you talking, George, about, women being, forced to have babies. Like, I think that for me feels like a very psychologically damaging experience. And there's a book that I've told you about, My Grandmother's Hands, that talks about the way in which trauma lives through generations. And so, like, when we think about those kind of experiences that Black women were subjected to and how that, lives through our biology, what is being passed down to our future generations, and what does it mean then for us to understand the trauma? Because I as a man cannot understand the trauma of being forced to have a baby that then becomes enslaved, that you have to raise. Like, that feels very insidious. And so, like, that is like the deeper pain that is inspiring the rage. And so we have to,
and I think there's like literal,
we have to listen.
Yeah, and there's like literal and metaphoric implications of that, right?
Yes.
Like, in that instance, it's literal birth.
Yes.
But in the instances, like, to George's point, cross applicable in different sectors, Black women being forced to labor and forced to produce, right? Even when they know there are inevitable violences. And so I guess, like, my question that I want us to, like, lean on is, like, what are Black women owed from communities that they have spent generations sustaining?
What I would say is Black women are owed equity, are owed access, and owed opportunities for the various ways they've had to put their bodies in the line to make sure other people got access, opportunity, and resources. The word reparations come to mind. And I think that it would not just be reparations for slavery, but all of the mitigated violence and all the state-warranted violence that's happened towards Black women even after the plantation, especially if you can acknowledge, like, high infant mortality rates, or the way that Black women get pushed out of jobs, or the way that they're valued, the way that their labor is valued less than other people. That's what I would say, though.
And as we close out, I want us to end the episode with how Dr. Brittney Cooper ends her book. On page 275, she says, "May your rage be a force for good. What you build is infinitely more important than what you tear down."
And that brings us to our call to action. Dr. Cooper reminds us that the goal of rage is not destruction for its own sake. The goal is transformation. If Black women's anger is revealing inequities in our communities, then our responsibility is not simply to acknowledge those inequities, but to address them. When we think about the action we can take, that first action is to listen to Black women without requiring them to soften or cushion their words.
The second one is going to be challenging tone policing. Every single time you encounter it, observe it, you are interrupting and naming why it is harmful.
That third action is examining how labor, care, and responsibility are distributed in relationships that Black women have in their communities.
That next action is going to be replace admiration for Black women's resilience with a commitment to Black women's well-being. They are not superwomen. They are humans deserving of care, deserving of consideration, deserving of empathy.
And that fifth action is to create environments where Black women can be honest, vulnerable, and imperfect without punishment, without some kind of retribution, because they are inspired to feel the rage that they feel.
And lastly, build communities where care is shared, not assumed. Oftentimes, Black women's labor is invisible because we think it is a part of our everyday being. All of us are responsible for interrupting the violences that we navigate in the anti-Black world.
And so then the question becomes, are we willing to learn from what Black rage, Black women's rage teaches us? Because we know real transformation begins when we stop policing Black women's response and we start addressing them and the conditions that produce them. We must replace admiration for Black women's resilience with a commitment to their well-being and recognize that liberation is not an individual project, but a shared collective responsibility. If this conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with a colleague, a friend, in a classroom, at a graduate seminar. If you would like to learn more about the mission and vision or chime in on this conversation, please go to educationincontext.org. Thank you.
Thank you.